What's up, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about an X-Men book that I finished reading just a few minutes ago. New X-Men Academy X Volume 3, Exposed. This collects New X-Men Academy X 12 through 15 and the Academy X Yearbook Special. And this takes a few of the running subplots that have been building up and accumulating throughout this series, and it kind of takes them all to a boiling point, if you will, and lets everything blow up. And then by the end of the volume, spoiler alert, all the kids kind of reconcile and they're all friends with each other. Number one, if you remember at the end of the previous volume, there was a short two-part story where David basically has this really intense hallucination of what is going to happen to him if he removes the mental block that makes him forget the knowledge that he absorbs. And I really didn't care for that story because when I was reading that volume, I didn't feel like it really had that much of an impact on what was going on in the series. I felt like it was just an extended what-if story, basically. But as it turns out, that is actually having a very huge impact on the rest of the series, because as we see in this volume, David is basically letting what he saw happen in that hallucination affect how he's acting towards his friends, specifically Noriko, who he was married to in that hallucination, and then in this book, he's kind of distancing himself from her, and she's noticing that, and she's saying, hey, why is he being this way? Why is he acting so weird? That, on top of, at the very end of the second volume, or it might have been, might have been at the end of the first story in the second volume, but sometime close to the end of the second volume, Kevin Ford found out that Josh and Rain Sinclair had been secretly having a relationship with each other, and so at the end of the second volume, he told Josh, he said, listen, either you break it off with Laurie, or I tell the entire school that you and Rain had a thing. Well, Josh is an idiot and decides that he's going to handle that by not doing either of those things. And so Kevin goes and tells Scott and Emma, and then Rain leaves the school, and then that kind of segues into her joining the Peter David X Factor Investigations series that was going on right around this time. I think it had started, actually, well, the Madrox miniseries happened before House of M, but then the main X Factor series started like right after House of M. So this kind of segues into that status quo. And then you've also got Laurie, who kind of sort of blows up at everybody. She starts using her powers of pheromone control a little bit more brazenly. She uses her fear power to kind of keep Josh away from her. And then at the school dance, she forces David to kiss her. And all that is kind of causing more of a schism in the group. Basically, lots of stuff going on in this book. Just the whole team is just kind of not a team, really. They're all kind of being scattered to the four winds because of minor, I don't want to say minor, but teenage problems that they're all going through. A lot of this just boils down to teenagers having relationship problems with each other, and I don't mind that. I know I said in one of my previous reviews of the series that a lot of people really hated this series because it wasn't enough superhero action and that it was too much teenage melodrama, but I like that. That was my favorite aspect of this series because it made these characters feel real. We got a lot of character stuff in this series because it focused on the problems that they were having coalescing as a group, and I thought that worked very well here. This volume, I really liked it overall. It also made me like Volume 2 a lot more overall, specifically that two-part story where David got to see what would happen if his mental block was removed. This made that two-part story a lot more relevant in this overall series, especially in the last chunk of this series. I can't really think of a whole lot that I disliked about this volume. I did want to briefly talk about Rain Sinclair, Wolfsbane. Like I have said, I really dig this series, and I really like all of these new characters, and I like all of the care that the creators, DeFlippis, or DePhillips, I think is how his name is pronounced. I've always, when I saw it, I thought it was spelled DeFlippis, but I think Nunzio DePhillips and his wife, Christina Weir, they put a lot of care into creating all of these new characters, and also further developing characters they didn't create, like Jay Guthrie, Icarus. But I have a feeling that a lot of people, another reason they didn't necessarily like this series as much, is because these creators didn't really have a good handle on Wolfsbane. And that is true. That's something that I didn't really notice when I was reading the series when it came out, because when this series was first coming out, I hardly knew anything about the X-Men. Even when this part of the series was coming out. It was especially true when the New Mutant series was coming out by this creative team. I definitely didn't know hardly anything at all about the X-Men, but even by the time you got to these issues coming out, I still didn't know a whole lot about the original New Mutant series, and that meant I didn't really know a whole lot about Wolfsbane. But this series really treats her almost like a completely different character. When she is first introduced in the New Mutant series that immediately preceded this series, she is almost an entirely different character. Her accent is gone. She rides a motorcycle, wears leather jackets. She's macking on teenage kids. This is not the Wolfsbane that a lot of people probably liked from the original New Mutant series. Now, in retrospect, part of the reason that doesn't bother me very much is because I'm not a huge fan of the Wolfsbane character from the original New Mutant series. The whole, as Josh from this series described her at one point, frumpy Catholic schoolgirl, that whole angle on her character and her being really judgmental towards everybody and really shy and reserved, that didn't really work for me. She was probably one of my least favorites of the New Mutants. I know there are people out there who like her, and her characteristics felt very real, just like how this series makes these characters feel very real because it puts a lot of time and effort into creating and crafting their characteristics. The original New Mutant series did the same for Wolfsbane. It was just that in that case I didn't really care for her character. So that doesn't bother me a whole lot that this series is treating her basically like a brand new character, basically retconning everything about her and just creating a brand new character from the ground up. It's handled a little bit better in this volume. In one of the last issues, Shan, she goes to visit Rain, and she's got her accent back, and we're told that basically she was just trying to hide her accent to try and impress Shan and Danny. Okay, that doesn't really make sense, and that's not the reason that she didn't have the accent when she was reintroduced in the previous series, the New Mutant series before this. So that's not really the same reason that we were given, but that's okay. But this does kind of sort of do a better job of handling Wolfsbane than she had been handled before now. But I would say if I had to pick one aspect of this entire series by DePhillips and Weir that I don't like, it's probably that I get the feeling they didn't do a good job handling Wolfsbane. And it's almost like they had this idea of one of the staff having a relationship with Josh, and they didn't really know who they wanted that to be, so they drew straws, and they ended up being Wolfsbane, and so they changed her character a little bit to make that work for that plot that they had in mind. But it's a situation where that character does not fit the plot that they had, or at least the character as she existed back in the 1980s and 90s. But overall, if that's my one complaint, that one character who's not even one of the main characters of the series, she was really more of a plot device and a secondary character. But if my biggest complaint is that you've got one character who's not handled the way she used to be handled, and even then I don't really mind very much because I didn't like the way she used to be handled, that's really saying quite a bit, because I still, overall, I really like this series. And I know I'm in the minority there. I know that most people really didn't like this run. They liked this series a lot better when Craig Kyle and Chris Yost took over the series. But I'm not one of those people, and whenever I get around to talking about their run, I will talk about all the stuff and all the reason why I didn't like their run. But overall, I really liked this series. There are a lot of subplots that were set up here that unfortunately they don't get to be paid off anywhere. And I'm still not sure if DePhillips and Weir knew that they were leaving this series and so they were kind of trying to wrap everything up, or if they were trying to set up some subplots for future stories, and then they found out they weren't going to be writing this series anymore. Like Marvel kind of said, okay, we're taking you off this series. I'm not sure. The big one is that Laurie, her dad, is a big, famous kind of Dr. Oz psychologist kind of guy, and he has the same powers as her, the ability to manipulate and control pheromones. And that's kind of how Laurie was born. He used his powers on Laurie's mom, made her unwillingly fall in love with him, and then somehow Laurie got away from him. I don't really know how. I'm not sure how she fell out of love with him. That's never explained. But in this book, Scott and Emma are asking him, hey, would you want to come to the school and be an on-staff psychiatrist and therapist for the students? And he says, yeah, I think I'll do that. And then that's never followed up on in any way. I believe in the House of M tie-in with this series, we do get to see Dr. Garrison, that's his name, we do get to see him in that alternate reality, but we don't ever get to see what happened to him in the main Marvel 616 timeline. We don't know, does he try to make a move to get closer to his daughter, maybe try and be a bad influence on her and try and get her to use her powers the same way he gets to use his. We don't know. That's something that Kyle and Yost apparently had no interest in following up on. Also, it seems like the creators here, Weir and DePhillips, were wanting to have Magma be one of the new student advisors since Wolfsbane left the school to go join Jamie Madrox's X Factor team. And then, of course, as of House of M, Magma, she was off with her boyfriend somewhere and accidentally killed him, and that kind of made her go a little bit crazy because her powers were still happening, but his powers were taken away. So that's kind of referenced in one of the last issues here, where she mentions to Danny and Shan, hey, by the way, I'm going on vacation real quick, and then I'll be coming back to be a student advisor. And then, of course, as far as I know, she doesn't come back to the school because, or she does in the aftermath of House of M, but she's not a student advisor anymore because Kyle and Yost did away with the student advisor thing in their run on this title. So there are some subplots that are set up here that don't get followed up on because these guys didn't really get to continue doing their run, which I have a feeling they wanted to do more, and Marvel just asked them not to do anymore. They wanted to have someone else on this title. I have a feeling that that's what was going on, but I'm not 100% sure. So overall, those are my thoughts on New X-Men Academy X Exposed. I really enjoyed this volume. Didn't have very many complaints at all, but if you guys have read this volume, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back later in the week with some other videos. So you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will catch you later. Have a good one.